Welcome back to the Facts First podcast. I'm your host, Tim Blaine. We have two guests today, Robert Tosh Plumlee and Ralph Pezzullo, the co-authors of the new book, Deep Cover, Shallow Graves. Tosh is a former military intelligence operative, contract pilot, and longtime participant in some of the most controversial chapters of the American Cold War. Deep Cover, Shallow Graves offers a first-hand look into the world of political intrigue, covert military operations, and alleged government corruption. It takes readers behind the curtain of secret missions, high-level power struggles, and some of the most consequential events of the 20th century, including the JFK assassination, a tragic event he witnessed firsthand. And the man who helped Tosh tell his incredible stories is Ralph Pezzullo. Ralph is a New York Times and international best-selling author, journalist, screenwriter, and host of the documentary podcast Heroes Behind the Headlines. Author or co-author of more than 30 books, including Jawbreaker and Ghost, Pezzullo brings decades of experience covering intelligence, diplomacy, and global conflict to Deep Cover, Shallow Graves. And now that I've read that lengthy introduction to you guys and made you patiently wait to hear about yourselves, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you very much.
Who is that guy?
I know, right? It's sorry to summarize your lives in 1 minute, but that's how we intro. This is a fascinating book. This is I was thinking today that this book could easily have been 4 books, at least. There's so much to the stories that you're telling. There's so many stories, period. It's really, which makes it a great read, because it's like, there's no wasted space in this book. I'm curious first, Tosh, like this, and we'll get into all the details of some of the stuff that you went through. This was a life you have led that was basically like held into secrecy. You couldn't tell a lot of these stories, or most of these stories, throughout your life, and you had to be very hush-hush. Now that you have these stories out there, what's the main feeling? Is it relief? Are you nervous? How do you feel?
Well, I'm very happy, but I'm very cautious. It opens up a lot of doors that still today are supposed to be shut, stay shut. I feel good that the truth, from my point of view, and is out there, and it's been a great honor to work with a gentleman, my co-author, Ralph. To have his experience come on board and help me get this story out means a lot. It's like anything else. I mean, we could do five books off all this, but it's a great honor to have the book finished, the book done. It's been in the making for 60 plus years, so to speak. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. I would imagine there's a certain amount of just getting it off your chest and being like, oh, I can finally say some of this stuff. Although you have been, and there's parts of the book where you do try to get the word out. Like, I'm remembering the stuff with Gary Hart and John Kerry and elements like that. And you've gone on podcasts and stuff. So it's sort of the culmination of all these things that you're beginning to say. But yeah, I mean, have there been any blowback for you? Has there been people being like, hey, you shouldn't have said this stuff?
Oh, all the time. I mean, they call it "don't poke the bear" anymore. Put the spear away. Put the spear away. Don't poke the bear. Let sleeping dogs lie. They'll wake up and bite you. Things like that. I mean, that goes with the territory. So Ralph and I have talked about that quite a bit. There's certain areas there that are extremely sensitive still today. If this truth did come out officially, as some say, there would be a lot of stuff of history that would have to be rewritten, and also Lee Harvey Oswald would be vindicated, and the operations that were very secret in those years would be brought to light. And it's like the old adage in that movie, you can't handle the truth. And that's sort of where we're at nowadays, if that answers it.
Yeah, sure. I mean, and Ralph, to that end, when you first were contemplating coming aboard on this project, did you have apprehension? Like, ooh, should I not be poking the bear, as Tosh put it?
Really, I was just attracted by the story and Tosh's experience, and I just felt as though, the public needs to hear this. I mean, it's an incredible story. It's an incredible opportunity for people to see kind of behind the surface of how real clandestine operations work, and we get very few of those.
Yeah. Well, and how did you guys link up?
Well, we have a mutual friend named Louis Hertham, who's a well-known actor. I was talking to him. He's very very interested in the Kennedy assassination and has been following it for years and sort of knows all the people who are, alive, who are still talking about it or involved in some way. And he told me about Tosh, and he said, you need to talk to this gentleman and who he was and what he had done. And I reached out to him, and we hit it off. We did a couple of podcasts together, and then Tosh talked about the book he had been meaning to write for several years, and I said, well, I offered to help him, and that's how it started.
That's wild. So it's weird to think like the book kind of found you. It really, you know what I mean?
Yeah, in a way, yeah, yeah. A lot of books have originated that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then for Tosh, for when you started talking to Ralph and you sort of like, did you have stories that all of a sudden, since you started talking about all these things that came flooding back to memory? You're like, oh, right, I forgot about this for years.
Well, a lot of stuff I did just to stay away from it. You don't want to talk about it, threaten, going against the grain, so to speak. So there's a lot of reservations. But I really started out writing a book about the Cuban operations, known as the Cuban Project, running guns to Castro in the 1950s. Started out to write a book, or attempting to write a book, called the Black Knights of Cuba, KNIGH, Black Knights like pawns of Cuba. Um, that opened some doors that I were not supposed to open up because of classifications and secrecy agreements and things like that back in those years. This was in the late mid 70s, 76. My name surfaced through the church committee, through Senator Schweiker, Congressman Tom Downing, and my friendship with Johnny Rosselli and Sam Giancana, and my associations in Miami back in the 50s and early 60s, and then my gun running operations as a covert pilot supplying uh, Fidel Castro in the early years of the M26-7 Castro Revolution. So that was what I was going to write about originally, was the Black Knights of Cuba, supplying Castro, meeting some of the rebels, making Cuban friends, being a gringo running around the Sierra Madre Mountains, and I thought that would be a good book. So the Black Knights, well, Deep Cover was a spring off of Black Knights. So it's been an ongoing thing. How do I write it? How do I get it out? Um, it got attacked a lot. Credibility. Letterhead memos came out from the federal government. But anyway, we won't get into all that. But it was difficult to try to write a book, not being a writer, and writing about secret operations of Cuban operations inside the Sierra Madre Mountains and Miami, the Miami Cubans. Anyway, I don't want to ramble here. Help me out there, Ralph.
Rambling's fine. We got, it's you got to tell these stories. But yeah, I mean, Ralph, certainly jump in at anytime you have thoughts on whatever we're talking about.
No, I mean, for me, I feel as though all of the aspects of Tosh's life sort of fit together and create a story of who he was and what he got involved in. And therefore, I thought it was important to cover it from the beginning, from the way he was raised, the way he was recruited, all the way through
Yeah.
his life, through Iran-Contra, through the Kennedy assassination, because it's all sort of a piece, and it paints the picture of an extraordinary life and a very, very, very interesting person.
That was the experience as a reader, going kind of from one chapter to the next, kind of being like, "Wait a minute, and then he was involved in this? And then you gotta be kidding me." It's just these kind of,
Yeah.
you figure as somebody's the JFK assassination is enough. Obviously, this got books and books and books about. That's enough for a book. And I just kept going, "Oh my gosh, this guy keeps appearing and having all these affiliations with all these famous people that we know and historical figures and locations." And I actually should back up a moment. You guys kind of alluded to it, but for the listeners and people who are watching this, the book chronicles, and I would almost think of it as the four big things from the book for me are like JFK assassination, Castro in Cuba and that era, the like association and being in with mob figures like Rosselli, and as well the Nicaraguan, what we kind of know as the Iran Contra era, and the Nicaraguan Civil War, which are all major points in American history, especially Cold War history. And Tosh, your affiliation with this, as you alluded to, was the fact that you were recruited to be a CIA operative because of your skills as a pilot. And you flew these secret missions. They'd tell you who to pick up, where to fly, what you fly. And that was people, that was drugs, that was guns, depending. And you kind of never quite knew who you were being asked to do this for. But so that is the through line of all of these amazing things. So that for people watching, that's, I mean, if that's not a hooky enough thing to go get a book, then I don't know what is. And it is a fascinating story. But circling back, actually, Tosh, can you talk about you were this rebellious teen. You were literally stealing airplanes to go drive them around the runway, including one trip where you took off, and then it was talk about like that and the patriotism of the era, and forging your own documents to join the National Guard.
Well, that's what happened. I used to, when I was during World War II, I was raised in the war years, 42, 43, 44, 45. That was the years when patriotism was very strong. If you dropped the American flag on the ground, some Marine would kick your butt. I saw that happen, as a matter of fact. I used to lay down on the runways and watch the B-17s come over us, and the bomber crew would wave at us, and we'd wave back. We were about 8, 9, 10 years old. We'd sneak into the fence. So, and then I would hang out at the Highland Park Pharmacy and talk to all the guys, the pilots from the 8th Air Force that was home on leave, and they'd put their pictures of their airplanes up on the pharmacy wall, and they called me Little Bobby, and they'd buy me pops and stuff like that. And my mom worked at Knox Street Theater, and I hung out at the pharmacy with those old World War II guys. So I was raised in that atmosphere, loose lips sink ships type era. And so I run away from home when I wouldn't go to school. I run away from home when I was 14, forged a birth certificate, joined the Texas 49th Armored Division, learned how to start driving a Sherman tank at 15 years old, and then used that to get into the regular Army ID, to get into the regular Army when I was 16 and stationed at Fort Bliss. And because of a hand grenade incident at Fort Bliss, that was literally my first contact with the CIA. And how that happened was my drill instructor, it's in the book, he pitched a grenade in the hole bunker where the Leroy and I were throwing grenades at a little white post. Leroy was a black guy, and he was my friend, and they called me the End Lover. But anyway, he threw a grenade in the hole where Leroy and I were throwing grenades at a little white post. I saw him laughing. So I picked up a grenade, and instead of throwing it down range, I threw it back at the drill instructor, and it exploded at his feet. Well, it turned out to be a practice grenade, and white smoke went all over him. And the other drill instructors started laughing at him, and he jumped down in the hole and pulled me out of the bunker and took me to the base commander and said that I tried to kill him. And so the base commander grilled us, and he said, "Well, why didn't you throw a grenade down range?" And I said, "Well, I saw him laughing. I wasn't going to give him a chance to kill us and throw another grenade." And so, but as I was telling this story, there were 4 guys. 2 guys from the CID were standing in the background next to a door, and 2 other guys were standing next to them. 2 guys come up to me, and one of them said, "Well," he said, he said, "We like you. You got moxie." And I said, "I don't have VD. I don't play with those girls in Juarez." And I literally hit him. So that was my first contact with with the CIA, and that was the beginning. So then at that point, I was transferred to a special unit, which was patterned after the old World War II Dirty Dozen guys that were taking guys out of prison and putting them into special training programs to go behind enemy lines. They carried that operation forward secretly, covertly. CIA adopted it and started training young misfit juvenile delinquents, pulling them off the street and putting them in the Army special units. What they did, they had a choice. You could go to juvenile hall, go to jail, or you could go into the regular army. Or you could go, when you went into the regular army, you went into this special unit that was trained at Fort Bliss. So that was the beginning of the CIA contact at that point in time through military intelligence.
That's
And
a
like,
wild story. I'm
uh,
curious, Ralph, when you hear that story, when Tosh first told you the grenade story, which is one that sticks out from the book because it's an amazing story. As a writer, I assume first off you're like, okay, that's gold, and
Yeah.
then are you at that kind of story? Obviously, that's such a thing where there, are there going to be records for that? Do you have to then go and verify? Like, do you have to try to find if anyone can say that story, or certain stories you kind of go like, all right, that's your recollection. Let's move forward.
Right. Tosh has all his military records, so you can check his military records. And also, I had written a book earlier with a gentleman who also worked undercover in deep cover operations, who was British, and he was in the special boat unit, and he had been recruited in a similar way. He was robbing cars in London with his brother, and he was caught. He was thrown into Borstal, which is their equivalent of you know juvenile delinquents prison. And while he was in prison, he was approached, and they basically said, you can come with us, and we'll give you special training, or you can spend 8 years in prison. And he, of course, went, "Yeah, I'll go with you guys." And that led him into these, tier one units and then special operations, except different country. So the
Yeah.
same kind of experience. So it's not, a lot of these things that Tosh did, they just sort of resonated with me from other people I know who have done similar work.
That's great. And
we're looking in the
uh,
years of 1952. So this was actually before Green Berets and Special Ops was actually formed. So our units were spinoffs or led into that. Anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I just want to get a timeline here. So I was 14 years old in 1952.
I think you even mentioned like there very few people even knew the CIA what it was. It was still young, it was still these government agencies were still kind of getting off the ground. And I guess it makes sense that that they would start figuring out, let's recruit from a variety of places and see who works.
Right,
Let's
and a lot
see.
of this came out of World War II. So during World War II was sort of the first time you had the OSS, and they worked with the underground in Europe and a lot of countries, and they also worked with the American mafia, and so there was a lot of cooperation, and that's when it all started. And a lot of it, if you look back in history, it all carries over into the 50s, the 60s, and even into current time.
Yeah. Now, the first, I guess, series of adventures, if you will, that you got into was going to Cuba. And at the time, it was pre-Castro. It was Castro was like in the jungles trying to take over and trying to revolt, and it was Batista, and you. So you were flying these missions. I think what did you call, what is it, rooster hops? They called them, these little like short flights, right, to Cuba. And then, can you tell us about your first exposure to Castro and the Castros and that world?
Well, okay, in the late 50s, well, not late, 55, 56, 57, I went through White Rock Aviation through things similar to the GI Bill, and the Army trained me to be a pilot. So I got my pilot's license 1956. Then went to Miami, started working for a CIA front company, Riddle Airlines, Mountain States Aviation, and building flight time and started flying guns into Cuba for a little rebel who, at that point in time, I called Castro. I didn't know his name, whatever.
Sure.
But we had a problem with the D-18 Twin Beach on an engine, and we had to set it down in the swamps. At the base of the Sierra Madre Mountains, there was a swampy area there. And they, anyway, I was my co-pilot, well, I was a co-pilot, but my pilot, he got out to the road and got picked up and got back to the beach, and a PBY that belonged to Texaco Petroleum picked him up and got him back to Miami. I was lost in the swamps, and I thought Batista, if they saw us, they would shoot you on sight. And so I heard some people coming across the deal, and I tried to dodge them, and it turned out to be the Cuban rebels. It turned out to be, it was a turned out to be a good friend of mine named Sergio, and a lady by the name of Velma Espinen. And she turned out later to be Raul Castro's wife. And they got me back to Castro's camp there in the Sierra Madre. And I'd lost my shoes in the swamps, and Velma gave me the code name Zapata. And the rebels started calling me Zapata and shoes and among other names, which I
Yeah.
can't. So that was so then at that point in time when I got back, they sent the PBY in to get me, and I got back to Riddle, and then we started running guns that were stolen from our National Guard armories, and we run guns to that rebel known as Castro, secretly, covertly, sponsored by the CIA. At the same time, we was also, according to the Pan American Treaty, had to supply Batista with tanks, guns, and airplanes. So he was fighting fighting Castro. Castro was fighting Batista. The CIA was supporting under the table Fidel Castro by stealing guns from National Guard armories in the United States and then flying them to him, while at the same time, according to the Pan American Treaty, we were supplying tanks, guns, and planes to Batista in order to eradicate Fidel Castro. Did I explain this right, Ralph?
That sounds right. But when you would go back, let's say you're doing a run and were you seeing Castro every time? Was he like Zapata? Was it that kind of relationship?
No, not really. I mean, it was casual. I mean, I met a lot. I mean, Uh, there was two sides of that. One group, Raul Castro, at that point, his brother was working on the southern part of the Sierra down in around Guantanamo in that area. And then Castro was in the northern section up in the Santa Cristals and the Sierra Madre and that. So there was two factions. His brother was working the southern faction, and Castro was working the northern faction. So when we would make our airdrops, most of the time they were just pushed out cargo over the areas, and then the rebels would pick them up. So we didn't have direct contact. The only direct contact I had was when I had to land the aircraft there in the Zapata, and not in the Zapata swamps, but in the base of the Sierra Madre, and then got out. And I spent about 4 days with Castro. He gave me a cup of coffee and a fatigue hat to keep the mosquitoes off my face and stuff, and a pair of boots. So then they got me back to the coast, and then I got out that way. But then later, when I went back in a couple of times, I run into Velma, who turned out to be a very good friend of mine to the day she died. And we stayed in touch through intermediaries out of Miami Cuban community when she became the first lady of Cuba. Very fine lady. Her code name was Deborah, and she worked with the M26-7. In the book, there's a picture of her in her young age. She's about 22, 23, and I had a crush on her, but she had a crush on Fidel Castro, not Fidel, on Raul.
Oh, yeah.
And I got warned to stay away from her. Anyway, it's a long story there, but there's a story in the book about our meeting at the Jungle Hut. Am I telling this right, Ralph?
That's correct. That's
Ralph, you were there. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
Good story there.
That's a good one. It's a good one for,
memories.
it's good to tease some of these stories so people get the book too. At that point, well, I'm curious, Ralph, so is anything related to Cuba? I mean, obviously we're talking about historical stuff, so you have to do a certain amount of research and have to sort of try to find primary and secondary sources for this stuff. Is stuff related to Cuba harder to look into because of the nature of it being closed off for so long and that kind of thing?
Not really. A lot has been written, and a lot of has been written by people who participated, who were there were a lot of people who were attracted to Fidel Castro and his movement in the beginning, and they were Tosh met them as guerrillas in the mountains, and then later they turned against him, and some of them, including your friend, uh, what Gordon,
Sergio?
what
Oh,
what was his name? The American guy that you're pictured with in Raul Castro's camp,
William Morgan.
William
Bill
Morgan.
Morgan, who was later executed by Castro, by the way. Good
Castro
friend.
found out that he had turned against them. In fact, Tosh's friend Sergio, who he met the first time when his plane went down in the swamps, they be Tosh and Sergio became lifelong friends, and Sergio became also turned against Castro and was recruited by the CIA. And
Yeah.
actually, Tosh and Sergio worked together at Dealey Plaza when President Kennedy
Uh,
was shot.
I met Sergio when they were holding the United Fruit hostages and the Navy guys from Guantanamo in 1957. There's a picture of Life magazine of Bill Morgan in front, and I'm working behind him in a burnout building that Batista had blown up. Life magazine, Lee Hall took a picture. That's in the book. And then also one of the Cuban tanks, uh, Sherman tanks. I'm on top of the tank. Life took a picture of that. That caused a real problem because I got corporal stripes on. Well, anyway, there's a whole story there.
I feel like, is that
Yeah,
the picture where you're just smiling directly to the camera? Or we could is that
well, on the tank, I'm
Yeah.
sitting there with Che Guevara and three other guys. This was, of course, before anybody even knew who Che
Che
Right.
Guevara
Guevara was
Yeah,
was.
on
yeah.
the thing.
Yeah, right. Oh, yeah, all these guys. So I'm sitting up there, and I've got my old army fatigue shirt on, and I got American corporal stripes here, and the CIA went ballistic. Want to know what in the hell a CIA operative is doing, undercover, doing on top of that damn tank. And especially Life magazine took the picture. I think it was Lee Hall that took the picture of that. So, and that's in the book, by the way, a little story there. So what we do in the book, we're dropping breadcrumbs. We're pointing people where to go to confirm the history that's not recorded or been covered up because of whatever reasons. So we're pointing these little stories of where to go.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that means anything, but to us, how else do you tell a story like this?
Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
these were sort of intimate, small operations at the time. And when Tosh first went to Castro's camp, there were about 20 people there. That's all.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, when I assume did you know always, like, right away, you talk about Riddle Airlines. I mean, like, were you always like, "I know this is a front. I know this is CIA," or were you just sort of like, "I'm not even gonna ask. I'm just gonna do my job"?
Not really. In those days, I mean, my gosh, I was you know what I was doing? I was trying to build time as a pilot, as a co-pilot, so I could qualify to go to work for Eastern Airlines. So that was my goal in life. I wanted to be a commercial airline pilot. Well, I started out as a mechanic at Southwest Aeromotive in Dallas, Texas at 13 years old, sweeping out hangars and exchanging my time to get rides with the pilots. The pilots there at Love Field in those years were old World War II pilots, and they were coming back and getting hired by executive aircraft. And the aircraft that they were flying were converted World War II aircraft, C-60 Lodestars, and made into passenger executive aircraft, the A-26 and stuff like that. So I was working nights at Southwest as a trainee aircraft mechanic, and then going to school during the day at Alex Spence Junior High School, uh, which I didn't go that much. But that's what I used that experience and background to go get to work for Riddle Airlines. You asked me if I knew it was CIA. No, nobody knew about CIA in those years. We knew that there was something going on because we're loading guns, ammunition, M1s, 45s, making bombs with Frank Sturgis and making raids, overnight raids into Cuba at Santa Clara and dropping these homemade bombs over the oil refineries, trying to set fires and all that kind of stuff. Well, these were CIA ops. Of course, at that point in time, we just thought it was just rebellion against private operations going against Cuba. So I don't know if this answers your problem. So as far as saying we knew it was CIA, no, you didn't even know anything about CIA, and you
Yeah.
didn't care.
Yeah, you were getting your hours.
Yeah, that's right. It's an adventure. My gosh, I looked up to these guys. These guys flew many missions, and some of them were with the OSS, some of them with the 8th Air Force, bombardier pilots. Pat Toy, he says, I'll teach you how to fly this plane. You got to remember one thing. He said, just remember Pat, power, attitude, and trims. He said, one day you'll lose an engine. He says, just think of Pat, power, attitude, and trim. He said, I'll save your life. Well, it did,
Yeah.
and I was 14 years old when Pat told me that story.
Well,
And,
it also speaks to the fact that, why a person like you, a young person, an adventurous person, would be perfect for this because, you're excited by these missions. You're having fun. You're learning. You're meeting people. You're seeing the world. You probably, it's not your time and place to be like, well, what are the long term repercussions of this? Who are the people really in charge? You're just like, I'm having fun doing these gigs.
Yeah.
oh, well, what you're talking about too, you're leading up into a thing they call illusionary warfare training.
That's going to be my next question. Get into it.
Okay. That's what happens. They take people like us and put us into a special training program. And the background, I'll try to sum it up. I know we have a time element here, but I'll try to sum it up. If you can control the communications to the people, you can control the thinking and actions of the people. That's illusionary warfare training. You manipulate, change the narrative, put it out publicly. That's the reason we capture a radio station is the first thing on any covert operation in those years. Capture the radio station, put out the propaganda, change the narrative, and whatever you put out becomes the gospel truth. And therefore, you can control the actions and the movement of the people. So, illusionary warfare in Nags Head, North Carolina was a program that was launched by the CIA and ONI. And that was the training program. At Nags Head, Victor Marchetti wrote about that. I mean, we would get into all that, but at Nags Head, that was a program that we were taught how to go in and change the thinking of the people in a foreign country, manipulate the facts, get the peasantry to go and work with you. How do you do that? Well, you can only do it by communication. So that was okay. In this program, there were many other programs. They had language studies. They had people that was going to Nags Head that was in different outfits. We were in illusionary warfare training, which was also a span-off later of MK Ultra and MK Delta, and Naomi and all these code names that came up later with Frank Olson and LSD. And my gosh, there's many stories more than just JFK in this book, Deep Cover, Shallow Graves, that goes one after the other. I mean, on and on and on. Am I rattling here, Ralph?
That's what we're here
Oh,
for. But
no,
Ralph,
you're
jump in.
tying
Yeah.
it together. Yeah, it's all good. All good.
So there's hundreds of stories
Yeah.
uh, from illusionary warfare training, uh, black ops moving foreign into countries, special operations known as like OMC 235, TFW Section C, Task Force 7, Operations 40. All these were covert secret operations. And what were assassination programs, assassination of foreign leaders, which was exposed to the Church Committee in 1975 and 1976. Nobody knew that we were training crews to go slit people's throats in foreign countries. in
Yeah.
order to get our programs online. I mean, that's what it was. That's the first time I heard online. Go slit this guy's throat, get your program online. Okay, you know. So
Why do
anyway,
you Yeah, go ahead.
go ahead. No,
Well, I was gonna
no.
say, why do you think what made the Outer Banks of North Carolina the spot? Like, what
It had been a secret Navy submarine base. It was
Yeah.
very much off the grid.
Mm,
And they just used those barracks and those facilities, and they set up a program that was really designed by Sidney Gottlieb, who was the architect, the leader of the MK Ultra
gotcha.
program.
Yeah.
And the whole idea was to develop super soldiers, people with special abilities, special language abilities, special abilities to infiltrate countries, and they had their own coded language, and they were tested for psychic ability, and that stuff was developed. They were hypnotized. They were given drugs. It was all this idea that we're gonna create these super soldiers that have special abilities, have special stamina,
Yeah.
this stuff. And
Ma-
and Lee Harvey,
manipulate.
that's where Tosh met Lee Harvey Oswald, who
Yes.
was another product of a broken home like himself. And Lee Harvey Oswald turned out just had a proficiency with languages, and he was put in Russian training and became very, very proficient in Russian. And later, he was in a program with about six, I think, 8 other young men who were defected to the Soviet Union. And the hope was they would be given a little bit of
All access. Yeah.
intelligence, and they would be recruited by the KGB. In Oswald's case, we know what happened to him because his control officer, Novoko was his name, later defected to the United States, and he told officials here that when Oswald came over, they didn't trust him because his Russian was so good.
Huh.
They ended up sending him to a factory in Minsk, outside of Moscow, and leaving him there. They didn't recruit him into the KGB,
Yeah.
and he spent a year there. That's where he met his wife Marina, got married, and after a year, he was bored because he wasn't,
It
his
wasn't doing what
mission
he was
had
there to do.
failed,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
he petitioned to come back to the United States, which he was allowed to do. And there's a whole story there.
Yeah. Were you able to, I mean, obviously it's like the most secret thing. Like, how do you look into, were you able to like, verify that the school was there? Like, are there any markers of it? Are there any like people who would corroborate?
Well, Tosh has some photos. He has a
Okay.
photo of himself there
Yeah.
at the school at when Louis Armstrong came to play
Oh
at the
yeah, you're like on the
casino.
stairs there. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Victor
and also
Bracetti.
it's confirmed in Victor Marchetti's book. Victor Marchetti was the first really CIA officer who kind of spilled the beans about covert operations, and he wrote a book, and he mentions Nag's Head, but it is
Well,
completely wiped off the record. Yeah.
Yeah.
and there were other places besides Nags Head. There was Camp Perry, which was very secret. There was another one 50 miles north of Nags Head on the Outer Banks, which was an assassination program, how to slit people's throats, how to sleep up on them. I mean, in those years, illusionary warfare, where Lee was, that was a defectors program as well as the program that I was involved with. I just want to clear that up there. There were many different type programs in these schools: illusionary warfare, Camp Perry. I can't remember all the names, 3 or 4 of them. Very, very top secret. These were the forerunners of a group that was formed in 1960 called JM Wave, which became known as the Cuban Project and was headquartered out of, uh, they call it Zenith Technologies at the University of Miami, which became the CIA Miami station. I don't
Yeah.
know if I said a mouthful there, but that's what happened. That's where so Nag's Head and all that became into that training program of JM Wave and assassination programs that were exposed in 1975 with Mafia, CIA, Johnny Rosselli, Sam Giancana, Santos Trafficana, and the Cuban underground, John Martino. All these people all came together. So we had a liaison with Mafia, and so one day I was talking to John Rosselli I said, well, they're not going to like what we're doing. He says, hey, he says, what do you mean they're not going to like? I said, well, the government's not going to like what we're doing. He says, don't you understand? We are the government. And that's always stuck with me
Huh.
because Johnny Rosselli was in charge of the Chicago mob
Yeah.
at that point. Sam Giancana was his sidekick, or they were together. But he's telling me, don't worry about the government. We are
We're
the
the
government.
government. It's a wild
And we
statement.
assassination foreign leaders. And so anyway, so Ralph and I had the problem, but how do we mold this? How do we get these stories out? How do they make sense to the average, as they're saying in the book, the average 8 to 5 guy cannot even begin to comprehend the background and how these operations came together.
That's the main hurdle, is that most people cannot imagine a world like this where there's no structure, there's no
Yeah.
paced out stops, there's no punching a clock, right? So people ask for, well, show me, pay stubs. Well, there weren't any pay stubs. In fact, Tosh talks about how a lot of times they were paid with chips from the Tropicana Hotel in
Havana.
Miami that was being run by the mob. So they
Yeah.
would just steal chips, and they'd hand these guys chips. When they were in Cuba, they'd cash them in, and that's how they were paid. So the whole idea was to hide everything.
Yeah.
So there's no record at all.
When you guys were
They
at
used to give us chips and a woman.
you go.
Made a young guy very happy in those
Yeah,
years.
right? You're the perfect age.
Anyway, sorry, I
Um,
regress.
When you're at Nag's Head, when you were you expected to kind of not get super close with the other people, the other operatives there? Were you guys forming close bonds? I assume there's a little bit of distance you're supposed to keep because you're all about to go out to the field.
Well, no, it wasn't like that. It wasn't structured. It was, well, in those years, you freewheeled. Uh, you just let it come as it may. Um, I don't know if I'm explaining this right. I mean, uh, the attitude was, it is what it is. You don't question. Ours
Yeah.
is not the reason why. Ours is simply do or die.
So when you
Um,
were there, were you like how frequently were you seeing? I mean, I know were you seeing Lee? Like, was that a everyday person?
Well, no, just, same way like, if you've been in the military and you're assigned to a squad, "Hey, how you doing?" It's all like that. "See you tomorrow. All right, let's go get laid. Let's wanna have a beer." Bingo, that's it.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't, we had a point there. You don't wanna get too close to anybody.
Yeah.
That was, you can't get involved in someone else's life if you're gonna try to protect your own.
Right.
So that philosophy is sort of taught. You have to be, there was an old saying that they used to tell us, call all your allies together and seek wise counsel. That's an old Indian saying. In other words, even your enemies, keep your friends, and this saying, I forget how it goes, but your enemies closer. But call all your allies together. That means get all the information you possibly can. Bring it all into one place and evaluate it. Take a look at it. That's what intelligence. That's why intelligence answers of intelligence questions is being an intelligence officer. Is you gather. It doesn't make a damn where you get your information. You live off information,
Yeah.
that's sort of your mindset. So you got to get your mind right. And you can't get your mind right worrying about what some woman's doing to you or what you're doing to some woman or that. So, but you got to call all your allies together. If you don't like this guy out there because he's telling you a bunch of crap, you still got to take all his information and you got to evaluate it. Am I making sense here?
Yeah, but it leads us perfectly into, and we teased it a little earlier, that you were in Dealey Plaza the day that JFK was assassinated. Can you just give us a little rendition of how you ended up there? You have very strong opinions on what you saw
Well,
and what you didn't see.
we'll make this as fast as we can.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah, take your time. You're good.
We could do 10,000 pages on a book. And Ralph knows this, and 5 pages about JFK, and the only interest would be those
Right.
5 pages.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you know. So, but how I got there was I was a co-pilot. flew a team in from Florida from information that the Pentagon got from another source, which was Private Eugene B. Dinkin and others, not just him. But as a result of that, they formed a team, and I happened to be a co-pilot. That was all. I wasn't part of that team. I was just a co-pilot flying another crew from Miami and Lantana, West Palm Beach, to Dallas, Texas. Bingo. And they happened to be who later become prominent people. In those years, I didn't know who the hell they were, didn't care. It's just like you're getting on an airplane today. You don't know who, I mean, you have 5 mafia guys back there, you don't know who they are, or whatever. But anyhow, that was my job. So, but we couldn't get into Redbird because of weather, so we went into Garland. And we stayed at Garland till the weather cleared. And then we went over to Redbird. And there was a safe place there next to Oak Cliff Country Club. And so that's where we parked the aircraft, the DC-3 at Redbird, and I went over to the safe house. And then Sergio said, "Hey, you want to go see the president?" Well, yeah, why not? Hell yeah, I'll go down there and drive down there. Sergio was operational. His job was to go and see spotters from the rumor that was circulating that Kennedy was going to be hit in Dallas. And that was information that came from Private Eugene B. Dinkin over in Switzerland and France at that point in time. That was the reason for the formation of this, quote, abort team, which I never liked the word abort because that means stop something we started. But at any rate, I'm there. My idea was, hell yeah, I'll go down. So we go down, go over the railroad tracks, go through, check the south parking lot. I'm just tagging along. Then nothing special. We didn't think anything was going to happen. This had been about the 8th, 10th rumor that he was going to be hit. Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, Austin. All this was Kennedy was going to be hit. So that was our attitude until it happened. And I watched the man get his head blown off. So that's where I think, I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah.
How did I get involved? That was my extent. I was a co-pilot on a flight with Rojas, a Cuban pilot that used to fly for Regina Air Cargo, and I worked for Riddle Airlines and Mountain States Aviation, both two CIA front companies. So at that point, a team was formed out of the Pentagon with CIA logistical support to go on a mission to abort a pending hit on the President of the United States. To this day, that mission failed. Why it failed was because of intelligence failure, and that's what they're still covering up today. Am I getting close to this, Ralph? Am I doing this right?
Yeah. Tosh and Sergio were on the South Knoll, which is across from the Grassy Knoll. And there's a parking lot there. And then when you go through the parking lot, there's a slope down to Dealey Plaza. They were standing on that slope when the presidential limousine came around, and they heard the shots and felt the bullets fly right over their heads.
My head, yeah, my head.
So
Yeah.
from their perspective, the shots came from the South Knoll, not from the Grassy Knoll. And actually, there was a picture that was taken almost simultaneously by Frank Consigliere, who was a UPI photographer. He wasn't intending to shoot the South Knoll, but he was shooting a couple that were on the ground protecting their children from the shots.
Yeah.
They didn't know where they were coming from. And in the background, you can see there's a car parked on the edge of the South Knoll parking lot, which Sergio and Tosh didn't see when they went through the parking lot. And next to that car is a man holding a rifle, and then there's another man with him who was probably the spotter.
Now, let me add here about that picture. It's in the book, Deep Cover, Shallow Graves. It's been analyzed by FBI lab. Now, in order to support the Warren Commission returns, they held back that picture. They said it didn't exist. They said it was shadows. Later, well, anyway, get the book, look at the picture, draw your own conclusions. That's the reason we put it in the book. Am I right, Ralph?
Yeah, there's been a lot of forensic analysis since the assassination, and they have all of them have concluded that that some of the shots that hit the president in the head came from that direction. So he was hit 3 times in the head, 1 time from the back and twice from the front. And those 2 front shots came from the
South. Yeah.
that's right. That's right.
And you talk about in the book, obviously you knew Lee Harvey Oswald, and you state pretty unequivocally like you don't think he was the shooter.
No.
Can you talk about why you believe that he wasn't and what he was doing there on the day?
Because I saw him standing in the doorway where everybody says this love lady standing. It's not love lady, it's Lee. And Marina confirmed it's Lee because of the shirt he was wearing and the button that was missing from the top deal, because he and Marina got in a big argument about that missing button. Now, that's been blown up by FBI lab. They can't afford to make this public because that would kill the Warren Commission and change the whole perspective. If you notice, Lee was labeled as the assassin before there was any investigation. So now, if you come out, Lee standing in the doorway as the limousine comes around, how could he be shooting from someplace else? Point 2, I try my best not to get involved in conspiracy talk. My feeling is this: nobody shot from the picket fence. The shot came from the south side of the triple underpass. Now, Sherry Feister and I, she was a good forensics expert, and Jim Mars and I did a little experiment on a Sunday morning, damn near went to jail because of this. We went down, and on Sunday morning early, Jim goes to the south side of the triple underpass, and he fires off a firecracker, a TNT. You know what happened? Everybody on the south side and the north side looked to the picket fence
Because of
because
the
of
way the sound
the triple underpass focused the sound just like a bugler, and it pushed it over to by the Bowers radio tower. And the cops and everybody at the time of the assassination went to that area. The shots came from the left side of the south parking lot. If you actually figure this out, there's a 10-degree slope, 5-degree turn to the left. If you look at what I'm doing right now, well, you can't do it. Okay, I'll do it like this. Here's the limousine. See it right there?
Okay.
All right, drop it down. What do you see? You see the back of it, right? See the back of it. Okay, do it. Okay, here's level,
Yeah.
10 degrees. What do you see? You see the
Sure.
back of the limousine, right?
Uh-huh.
Turn it that way. What do you see?
Back.
Headshot
Yeah.
directly from the south underpass directly to it. Sherry Feister proved this with blood splatter. She was a forensics expert. Jim Mars set off the firecracker. The Dallas Police Department down there arrested us for disturbing the peace on a Sunday morning by setting a firecracker off from the Dealey Plaza. But anyway, it's another story. I'm rattling here.
Do you think was Lee there kind of in a similar capacity as you and other people, where he was maybe told to go there on an abort mission?
My feeling, Lee was part of the team.
Yeah.
He was there with the team on the north side. If you look at too, you hear all this umbrella. I mean, we get into all this kind of stuff, which I do try to stay away from, but anyway, you can't. But Umbrella Man, oh, he's giving signals. Bullshit. So Gator was a friend of mine also. He was on board the flight, by the way. If you look at him, you'll find out he's got some fingers missing on his right hand. He used to wrestle alligators in West Palm Beach. He lost his 2 fingers on the right hand, I think it was. But anyway, after the assassination, he's walking away and he's got a radio in his back pocket. You can see the antenna. Prior to that, he's sitting down next to this guy that's got an umbrella. The reason he's sitting there, his job was, if there's anybody there on triangulation shooting, take them out. That don't mean kill them. That means get next to them, bump them, do whatever you got to do to change their timing until that limousine can get out of the kill zone. That's his job. This guy is sitting there with an umbrella within 5 feet of when Kennedy's going to come around. Gator goes and sits down next to him. There's a picture of this. He's got the umbrella. All right. Oh, he's supposed to be doing this, signaling the shooter to shoot. That's bullcrap. Gator was sitting there. The point is, Gator was operational. Lee's in the doorway. He's not up on the 5th floor. They say that's Lovelady. Lovelady was there, but Lovelady was behind what is called as Lee. Marina, who does not go public, but there's a case just here recently before Porter died, before her husband died, where she did talk a little bit about the shirt and the missing button and the argument that they had because she didn't sew that button on that red flannel shirt. Am I talking out of school here, Ralph?
Yeah, no. I want to point out that Chauncey Holt, who
Right.
was another undercover operative who Tosh knew well, who died a couple of years ago, but he said that when he got to Dealey Plaza, it was almost like a spook convention.
Right.
There were mafia, there were anti-Castro Cuban exiles. I think they flooded the plaza with as many people as they could to throw everybody who was trying to analyze what was going on off.
Chauncey was passing out the Secret Service badges to these.
Chauncey he was a forger, and he had forged all the Secret Service credentials, and he'd handed them out to all kinds of people. And people who were witnesses said that when they tried to run and find the shooters, they were stopped by Secret Service agents. Well, the Secret Service said, we didn't have agents out in the plaza. Everybody was with the car. So there was what this shows is there was so much pre-planning. And a lot of the planning was around throwing everybody off track.
It goes back to illusionary warfare training. Change the narrative, make people see something that's not real. That's in the book. Even from the very beginning on the intro that we wrote, this is all covered. So, anyway.
Yeah. And then, so then for you, who, you're talking about they flooded the zone with spooks. They were doing this. Like, who do you think is the they in this circumstance?
Well, I think that it was a group out of the national security apparatus of the United States who were convinced that President Kennedy and his brother were communist leaning, because after the Cuban Missile Crisis, after the Bay of Pigs, in which they had stopped listening to the CIA because they didn't trust the intelligence they were getting from the CIA. They formed their own unit called KENCON,
Right.
KENCON. It was their own intelligence operation. Now, a lot of people speculate that Lee Harvey Oswald was part of that because that's the reason he was able to return to the United States so quickly, because Robert Kennedy, who was the Attorney General, had to approve that. And those approvals usually take like 4 or 5 years, and his happened in a matter of months. So anyway, if you look at the history, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, where the generals and the Joint Chiefs of Staff were advising the president and his brother to go to war with the Soviet Union, and that a war would only cost about 10 million American casualties in nuclear exchange. President Kennedy was horrified, and he basically avoided it and started a direct communication channel with Premier Khrushchev in the Soviet Union and with Fidel Castro in Cuba. And Tosh flew those flights to Cuba. But the envoy was an ABC reporter, named Lisa Howard. So they were trying to negotiate behind the scenes. The CIA and the national security apparatus of the United States at the time, they were so focused on the Cold War, they saw this as treachery by the president and his brother. And they decided, we got to take these guys out. They're going to sell out the United States. They're going to reach an agreement with communists. We can't have that. And I think the decision was made, and it was a group decision. It wasn't just a small group of people. That the president was a threat to national security.
All right, back into along those same lines. At that point in time, President Kennedy wrote a directive, the NSAM number 263, that he was going to withdraw what was it, 1,500 troops from Vietnam, something like that, when he got back from Dallas. He didn't get back from Dallas. He come back in a pine box. At the same time, over in Hawaii, some of our people from National, well, we get into all that, but they overrode Directive 263 and did their 273 NSAM. And that meant they were going to escalate, put more troops into Vietnam. Shortly after that, we had the fake flag known as the Tonkin Gulf incident. Now, back to who did what. That goes back to LBJ. Now, one of the things that really happened at that point in time when the Directive 263 was written, that killed a contract with Bell Helicopter to lose $22 million in contracts to build helicopters, to be used in Vietnam.
Yeah, it was like the military-industrial complex. So
Right.
a lot of people don't know it, but it's a fact that all of Kennedy's cabinet and all of the foreign policy establishment were in Hawaii that weekend. This is very unusual that they would be all of them would be out of Washington at the time that the president was on a campaign stop in Dallas and got killed. But that's where they drafted sort of what the future foreign policy of the United States would be towards Vietnam. And it would be escalation, which was directly contradicted what Kennedy had just put out in Directive 263.
Wow.
So they had prepared, they were prepared to escalate even before he was dead.
Wow.
And we had the Tonkin Gulf incident that authorized, after Kennedy's death, that authorized on a fake flag to increase troops into Vietnam and re-implement the Bell Helicopter and the Collins radio contracts. Am I right there, Ralph?
Yeah. And I was a kid living in Vietnam at that time. I was like 12 years old. My dad was working at the embassy in Saigon. And I remember all that.
And they had an assassination in Vietnam at that time, just prior to Kennedy getting assassinated.
Yeah, they killed the president, Dien Bien. Yeah.
And that was on the assassination of foreign leaders, our program.
Yeah, from your program, sure. It seems like, the more you look into, the more you read or talk to people about the Kennedy assassination, it seems a couple things just seem true, that he had so many potential enemies and potential enemies and people who, like, it would make sense if they were the ones who carried out the assassination, whether it's the mafia and, or in, the military industrial complex, LBJ, the Russians, the Cubans, do you guys have the sense that, like, it probably, even if it wasn't that day in Dallas, like, it was coming? It was kind of yeah.
Well, he
talked about privately about, my laser number.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Well, and then when Bobby Kennedy, his days were number two. They'd already was going to attack the mob out of Havana and all the other places, so it was not just him going against the military industrial complex.
Yeah, there were so many players,
That's right. I mean, so and that was the reason for KENCON. He wasn't getting the right intelligence. In other words, he was extremely upset. So was his brother. So they set up their own intelligence operation and started, wait a minute, something's going on here. Assassination of foreign leaders. Trujillo was another one. But anyway, back to this is what we attempted to cover in the book. We could not cover all this. It would have been 900-page book if like what we're talking about now.
Sure.
Yeah, in the book, one of the things that's kind of key is that there was a memo that was written by J. Edgar Hoover 2 days after the assassination that has recently been released.
Right.
One of the recent releases of documents. And it's kind of a memo of a meeting he has with LBJ 2 days later. The two of them were very close friends and neighbors. And they sat down and he writes down, there's no conspiracy. There was one assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald. They just kind of laid out what the cover story would be. And they stuck to that.
Well, that was the other thing. The other point that I was like, thinking that seems to resonate is that the Warren report, I can't find anybody who seems to be like, yeah, they nailed it. It seems like it was pretty much a joke and people knew it then too.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it was a political panel. It wasn't really
Right.
a thorough criminal investigation. Had it been a thorough criminal investigation, there would have been a whole different report, the whole
Okay.
of a magic bullet. And, they just cherry picked information that would make their case. They presented this to the public.
Bring it up to full time. If what we're talking about today was suddenly reversed, an official report came out from some official agency, CIA, ABC, CBS, President, what's his name? I can't pronounce his name without getting upset. But anyway, if it all came out today, what would happen? For instance, if what we're talking about, conspiracy, and a president that we shot and killed, what would happen today if we turned out and we prove that there was a conspiracy, that there was a interagency, a secret government within a government that conspired to have a sitting president killed? What did I just say? If today, official document, what is official document? I can take a fake letterhead memo and put your name down on it, and I can make anything right and real because it's official document. I can put down do you still beat your wife? You answer yes or no. No, you don't. You can only answer yes or no. Do you still beat your wife? No. Oh, okay. You did? Yes. No. Well, look, some things you can't answer. That's the JFK assassination. Today, if it came out, here's documentation, here's the smoking gun, here is the proof. It knocks the hell out of the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission was already set up before Lee was even dead. Now, we got two other guys that were buried. Well, that's another story. It's in the book. I have to read the book. We can sit here and talk all damn day.
Well, yeah, I was gonna say this is we as we guessed at the onset, like there's so much in here. I can't imagine we'd be able to get to it all, but it is a great jumping off point to go, hey, everybody should go check out this book because we haven't even talked about your adventures, with the mafia as much, with Rosselli or Nicaragua or all these things, and those are in the book too. So, and as well as more details and all this stuff that we're talking about. So I think that might be the best place to leave it because now I hope people listen to this and go, oh, I got to get this book immediately.
Yeah, yeah. And one last thing that Tosh just referred to is that um, the abort team on the grassy knoll side of the plaza did pick up two shooters, and they were killed. They told the story to Tosh years later when they were drunk, and they did kill these two guys. One was French, one was Cuban, and they were buried in a ball field on the other side of the triple underpass
across the Trinity River.
Yeah.
Now, that's on the record from the Dallas Red Squad. And, well, anyways, another story there. There's a lot of stories in the naked city, as they say.
Yeah, this is unbelievable. Thank you so much, Tosh and Ralph. This is I can't recommend this book highly enough. Anybody who's interested in any of these worlds, but even if you're just looking for a fascinating read, it's a fun and, like we said, it's jammed full of great stories and interesting people and a lot of names we've heard of and didn't necessarily know. So thank you so much to both of you for writing the book and for being here.
Thank you, Tyler. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for having us. We appreciate that.
Absolutely.